reorganize ourselves. Two other points in regard to Sister's presentation. There was a wonderful little booklet, really, that a Catholic school mother in Montana produced, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, of kind of a religion and science thing for first and second graders. And so all of the Old Testament passages that talk about the stars or the moon or the sun and so forth, and inserting all of it. It was very, very charming. I encouraged her to develop it further. I never heard from her since, so I don't know, if anything ever happened. But again, some of that's just personal creativity, huh? And that's the kind of thing that you could have in your parish grammar school to say, this month let's focus on, God in astronomy, or at Christmas time the Bethlehem star. I mean, there's all kinds of science that's involved with that. So that would be one. And then I meant to mention, two books came to my attention, and I mentioned these to Sister a couple of months ago, put out by Ave Maria Press at Notre Dame, Indiana. It's called Particles of Faith by Stacy Trazancos, Trasancos, Trazancos. And one is a teacher book, and the other is a student edition. And the subtitle is A Catholic Guide to Navigating Science. They're both very, very worthwhile. And even, especially maybe even for a priest to read, because we're faced with these questions on a regular basis, and be able to give an intelligent answer done by a woman who is a scientist and a strong practicing Catholic at the same time. Okay, so we want to move forward into our sixth session on the priestly presence, and I've asked Father Peschel, Msgr Pilato, is he back on? And he sent me a note earlier saying he's in LA, he couldn't get a substitute for his 11 o'clock mass, so he had to do it, but he'll eventually join us. And Bishop Kennedy and Msgr Batule. So, Father Chris, do you want to lead off on this? Where's Father Chris? He must be, all right. Well, I guess he won't. Msgr Batule, you want to, and Msgr Batule has a number of things to recommend him for this. One of which is that he was a pastor of a parish with a school, and he himself is a complete product of Catholic education. I hesitate to say, though, that every school he attended has closed. So don't invite him to yours. But he can reflect on this from his 13 years of Catholic education as a student, plus his own career as a teacher, and finally also as a pastor of a parish with a school. So I see Father Chris just surfaced, but you lost your place in the lineup. Father Bob, you want to start? Can't hear you. No, still no. There you go. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Father Peter. I'm happy to join you for this virtual conference. I've listened to many of the presentations thus far, and I am edified. I have been asked to participate in a panel on priestly presence in Catholic schools. And what I'm going to do is draw upon my own experience as a associate pastor, as a pastor, and also as one who teaches now. My current position is on the faculty of St. Joseph's Seminary in Yonkers, and I've been in the classroom for more than a few years, so I'm going to rely upon that experience as well. And I'd like to start this relatively brief presentation by making references to two episodes in the scriptures. Both of them are found in the New Testament. And the first episode is at the beginning of St. John's Gospel. And it is the incident in Jesus's public ministry where he is identified by St. John the Baptist. And you'll remember that the expression that is used for Jesus, the title that is given to him, is Lamb of God. There goes the Lamb of God. And you may remember that right after this designation is given by St. John the Baptist, that St. John mentions that two of the Baptist disciples follow our Lord. And when they begin to follow him, they pose a very important question, although at first glance it doesn't seem to be that important. And the question is, where are you staying? Where do you call home? And we know from the exchange which takes place between Jesus and these two disciples that he invites the two disciples to follow him. Come and you will see. Come and you will see. And then the evangelist says that the two disciples stayed, that they stayed with him that day. So that's the first episode, and as I mentioned early on in St. John's Gospel. The invitation extended by our Lord to follow, and it says that the two disciples stayed. They remained in the presence of Jesus. Second incident has to do with the Acts of the Apostles, and it would be the conversion of St. Paul. And we all know that story and its rich detail. I'd just like to zero in on one part of it. And this would be Acts chapter 9, and the particular verse is 19. And here the sacred author, St. Luke, writes, "He stayed some days with the disciples in Damascus." He stayed some days with the disciples in Damascus. The reference is to St. Paul. He is the he in that sentence. Now, this too would seem to be a verse that could be passed over quickly, but we should think about it and try and imagine the ramifications for it. That here you have someone who is persecuting the way, the followers of Jesus, and then all of a sudden undergoes a conversion. Now, for St. Paul to convert and to undergo a real transformation in every sense of that term, it would be necessary for him to learn from those who are already the disciples of Jesus and have been disciples of Jesus for a longer period than he is. So he stays with the disciples so that he might learn, that he might acquire what is necessary to be the tremendous evangelist that he wound up being. So in both instances, we have the word stay, to remain in the company of. And that's what I would like to use as the beginning of my remarks on the importance of priestly presence regarding Catholic education. And here I would be referring to elementary school education and also high school. But most of my own experience has been at the elementary school level. And the first item that I wish to introduce regarding priestly presence in our schools would be to identify the different groups within the Catholic school community. And by different groups, I'm talking about those who constitute what we ordinarily term as the Catholic school community. And again, if it's a parish school, the identification is easier. So I have in mind the students, those who are enrolled in the Catholic school. I have in mind the teachers, those who belong to the faculty, and this would also include the administrators of the school, the principal, and anyone else involved in administration. And the third group that I have in mind would be the parents. And I'd like to emphasize the first two groups in my presentation this afternoon. Regarding the students, I was assigned to St. Boniface Parish in Elmont right after I was ordained. And I was there for 5 years. It was a great introduction to the priestly ministry. And one of the reasons that made it a great introduction to the priestly ministry was St. Boniface School. I think it was the second or third oldest in the diocese. And during my time there, I think the anniversary was 125 years. So this was a parish of long standing with an elementary school of long standing. So as most of these experiences with Catholic schools begin for parish priests, the pastor sat down with the priests assigned to the parish, and we divvied up the grades. And that was the custom in my diocese, which is the Diocese of Rockville Center, to go about covering the parish school. And I remember that I was assigned the lower grades, and I believe it was the second and the third grade. And I must tell you that it was time very well spent. It wasn't a long time with the students. Usually what I did was limit my stay to 15 minutes. And I usually would go in the morning, and I had worked it out with the classroom teacher in advance that I would come at 10 o'clock or 10:15 or 10:30, whatever time was convenient for the teacher and the students. And what I tried to do was teach religion from the vantage point of a parish priest. And what I sought to do was to offer a religion curriculum that was not found in a textbook, although it backed up what the textbook was saying, but it was topics or themes that I thought the children should hear from a priest about. And I remember distinctly, it was a Dominican sister of Amityville, second grade teacher, and she knew that I was talking to her students about the Eucharist. And so I was mentioning that it's not a piece of bread, that it really and truly is the body and blood of Jesus, our Savior. And she encouraged me to use the expression that we all use for that transformation of the bread into the body of Christ and the wine into the blood of Christ, transubstantiation. And she said to me, and this was away from her students, but she said to me at the door of the classroom, our students need to know the terminology we use around our faith. And that was assuring to me, very encouraging. And again, I point to that because the parish priest has a lot to do with the education of young Catholics in his parish. And one of the best instruments that we have at our disposal is the Catholic school. Regarding the other experiences that I had with the youngsters, the students, I would say walking through the cafeteria, maybe once a week, maybe a few times a month, going out during lunchtime to the playground and talking to the students. But I have to say that my own emphasis, the concentration of my time the concentration of my presence was in the classroom. And it was a great joy for me as a parish priest to have that time with young Catholics in St. Boniface Parish first, later on in St. Martha's Parish in Uniondale, later on in Corpus Christi Parish in Mineola, later on in Holy Family Parish in Hicksville, New York. So in a number of assignments that I had, there was a Catholic school, and I just saw it as my responsibility, my duty, to be involved with the youngsters, especially as it pertains to catechesis. So that would be one group that we work with. The second would be the teachers. And here I would include the teachers whose classrooms I went into on a regular basis. I'd also include the teachers that I didn't see in classroom visits, but were on the faculty. And I would see them at faculty meetings. I would see them at activities connected with the school, which involved parents, which involved teachers, which involved students. And I'd have to say here, two experiences stand out. One was working with faculty members on developing a presentation for Middle States accreditation. And the school was Corpus Christi in Mineola, and the principal had decided that she was going to seek this kind of designation. She knew that she had to put in a lot of time, and she needed individuals to work on the project. So I volunteered, and I served on one of the committees, and the school wound up getting the designation as a successful school and one of the honored schools on the list or on the roster. But it gave me the opportunity to work closely with teachers in the Catholic school whose classrooms I didn't see. And again, it was an opportunity to engage in formation. Oftentimes, the teachers in Catholic schools don't have the vocabulary necessarily that would be necessary for putting a presentation like this together. But it was good that they were open to what was offered to them, that they made it their own, and that it was really internalized. So that would be the second group, the teachers. The third group would be the parents, those who have chosen to send their sons and daughters to the school, those who are paying the tuition, and those who ultimately will determine, along with their peers, whether or not the school has a high enrollment or just a mediocre or even a poor enrollment. So parents have a big say in that, how well the school goes. And as a parish priest, first as an associate and later as a pastor, I saw it as one of my responsibilities to gather in an unofficial way, in an informal way, their own thoughts, their own perceptions of what was going on at the school. Every once in a while, I did attend school board meetings. And I do remember spending quite a bit of time when in one school, we were working on finding a new principal. And the outgoing principal served on this panel with me and several other teachers and several other parents. And it was instructive to me to find out from parents in their own words why they had chosen to send their own children to Corpus Christi School. And I never forgot that, because it helped me later on in my priestly ministry to strive after certain goals that I thought our school should be working toward. So it was the input that I had received from these parents in an official capacity on a search team, a search committee for a new principal. but that was very, very important to my own ministry in Catholic schools. So the priest presence and to whom, and again, the groups would be the students themselves, the teachers, and then the parents. Second would be, it's always a matter of trying to discern properly how much time can I give over to this part of priestly work. I saw my work as a parish priest as integrally bound up with the parish elementary school, and I sought to give the school as much time as I could. But it always is a question of how much. And I always strove after several opportunities in every week. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of it having to do with the classroom, but not that exclusively. Some of it had to do with activities, athletics, field days, field trips, where I volunteered to go on. So all of that was very helpful in my own appreciation of the place of the school in a parish priest's ministry, in his outlook. Another point that I would emphasize would be that I tried to see my own priestly work as an opportunity to sow seeds, to use that image from the Gospels, and also to try to reap the fruit, And when I speak of sowing seeds, I'm thinking of the kind of impression that is left with the youngsters in our Catholic schools. I would say that the impression left by a parish priest often remains for a long time, especially if the experience was a good one. So what I tried to do was to have a future orientation to my immediate work at the parish school. And by that I mean, I was thinking down the line, thinking down the road. What kind of seeds would germinate? What kinds of seeds would grow up and yield that 160 and 30-fold? Now, we can reasonably ask the question, what is the harvest? And here I'm thinking of youngsters in their 20s, early 30s, deciding to marry. Today it's a big question with a lot of young Catholics. Where is that marriage going to take place? Is it going to be a destination wedding, or is it going to be a wedding in church? Not to dwell on the negative, but it's important to recognize that we haven't done well in the last couple of decades with sacramental marriages. But I'm thinking here about the impression that a parish priest leaves with youngsters who are 6th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, whatever it happens to be, that later on, when they're making decisions about how to marry, where to marry, impressions left by a parish priest could possibly tip the balance in our favor. And so again, the work of a parish priest is in the present moment, but it's also future oriented, so that there's some concern for what's coming down the road, what's going to happen later on in the lives of these young people. The last area that I would hit on in this presentation would be that I did see a difference in my own ministry as a parish priest working with the parish school. And the difference was between being an associate and being a pastor. And the chief difference would be that the pastor will always be dealing with administrative issues, financial issues, personnel issues. And here, I'd like to commend Thomas Carroll, who spoke earlier today about the contribution that a priest makes to Catholic schools. And he wasn't shy about noting some difficult areas. And I think those things can't be glossed over. I think they need to be addressed frankly, candidly, so that there's clarity on important points of doctrine, important points of discipline, important points of principle. The necessity to take up these difficult issues, especially as they involve morals and the culture. So the pastor is going to be more involved in that area, that arena, than the associate would be. And again, I would consider it very, very important that the pastor make known during his pastorate that the parish school is a chief responsibility of the parish, supporting it in the many different ways to support a parish financially. But the pastor is the one who's going to set the tone about what things will be acceptable and what things will be unacceptable in the Catholic school. And I think we owe it to the Catholic faithful to provide that kind of witness, to provide a witness which is clear about the things that we hold, the convictions that are ours, and that, if necessary, we will defend them. And that's the important role of a pastor, being able to rise to the occasion, being able to meet the controversy, the contingency at hand, and rendering an answer which is truly and deeply Catholic with an uppercase C. So that's really crucial. I think it does bear a relationship on how well our schools do. If the witness in that area is weak, then I'm not sure how robust a Catholic school can be in the community. When that witness is strong, I think it gives people, and here I'm thinking of parishioners and also parents, it gives them reason to be proud, to have pride in the Catholic school in their own parish. So I'm going to stop my presentation here, and I'll give way to the next presenter.
I should mention, or should have mentioned at the outset, when Father Bob was a seminarian, I took him to his first NCEA convention meeting in Boston. Where were you, a second theologian? Or?
No, I think that one was after my pastoral year, so it would have been the third year, or during at the end of that third year.
Yeah. So
I do remember that very well.
He makes obviously several very important points, but I would underscore the one, and actually it's his last point. If a school is really, truly, authentically Catholic, it becomes its own best advertisement, A, for recruitment of other children and families, and secondly, that the pastor can feel comfortable in appealing to the general support of the parish for it. If it's simply some kind of cheap alternative to the public scene, no one wants to spend money on that. And but if we have a very clear identity to it, people will say, yeah, particularly older people who grew up in a more robust Catholic culture will say, yeah, that's the kind of thing that I grew up with. I know what that's all about. And they'll be willing to put their extra bucks in the collection to support it. Father Chris, you want to?
Sure. Some of you I've met at previous conferences before, and some of you may have heard some of these stories that I'm about to relay. But Father Chris Peschel, I'm a priest of the Diocese of Fall River, Massachusetts, for 6 years now. I'm also a total product of Catholic education through grammar school, middle school, high school, college at Franciscan University, and then philosophy at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia, theology, St. John's Seminary in Boston. Only my grammar school and middle school have closed. High school and everything beyond is still open. Although I think the jury's out on St. John's Seminary these days, how much longer that's in our world. But I had a very similar experience to Msgr. Batule. In my first assignment as a priest, I was with a pastor who was very pro-school, and I was graced to be in a parish on Cape Cod that had the only grammar school for Cape Cod for the Catholic students. And so we had folks from a number of parishes that were coming to our parish school to educate their children. And from my earliest days there, I knew that I wanted to be involved. My pastor, like I said, was a very pro-school man. He had built a school in one of his previous assignments, but he was definitely on the tail end of his days in active ministry as he was kind of gearing towards retirement. And he said to me, as soon as I got there, you can be involved to whatever degree that you'd like in the parish school. And so I decided to make that a very high degree, to the point where I'd be out there every single morning to greet the children as they would come, to be a presence to the faculty, and to meet families, to meet folks who obviously were placing some kind of investment into their children's future, because I knew that the tuition at our school was not cheap, and that this was obviously something that parents wanted to get a bang for their buck out of. And in my perspective, that also meant getting the highest quality of the example of faith that could be rendered. And so I would from time to time teach religion classes there. I would step in and even do from time to time science experiments in the classrooms that had been converted over into science labs. My pastor had kind of paid for those renovations to be done. And I saw, as others had maybe pointed out in earlier presentations, the importance of the priest to be involved in the breadth of subjects to be taught in the grammar school, even at that low grade level, to show that our faith is not divorced from the truths that we learn in the multi-subjects that are taught in our schools. At some point during my assignment there, I was invited by Father Peter to come down to join this seminar, the Catholic Education Foundation seminar, when it was being put on at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia. And I came back from that seminar with pages of notes that I decided to send to my bishop, just as kind of a, here's what I went and did, just wanted to let you know. I honestly didn't expect a response from him, but he did get back to me, and he was in the process of forming a diocesan school board, Central Education Board at the time, and he invited me to be part of it, seeing that I had taken an interest in education. So I think it became worth it to share the endeavors and interests that I had as a young priest with my bishop, because he in that moment was able to I think take advantage of the fact that there was someone who not only cared deeply about education, but wanted to be as involved as possible. He asked me in the same meeting where he asked me to be on that board to move up to a parish off of Cape Cod to be an administrator, and unfortunately, it was not because of the school scene there. I would have loved that he'd have asked me to go because of the school. We are yet another diocese that doesn't really have any kind of policy in place concerning personnel and assignments for parish priests with schools. But I was happy that there was a school there. My main task in this assignment was actually to oversee a construction project that has since been completed. But I continued with the parish school to be a presence at the beginning and end of the day as parents and students were coming to and from the school. On Wednesdays, I made it a habit for the years that I was there to be the teacher of the 8th grade religion class. And what I taught was the education and virtue curriculum that the Dominican sisters had put out that I had been introduced to at this seminar. And it was kind of a little bit of a break from what the students had been learning in their regular 8th grade curriculum, which was a little more church history. And I was more concerned with what the practical aspects of learning their faith and having a relationship with Jesus Christ was going to be for their life. The students looked forward to it every week. And I don't know if that's because it was a break from their regular teacher or because I'd bring them, Dunkin' Donuts coffee and munchkins every Wednesday morning. But they appreciated learning practical aspects of how to grow closer to Christ and how to ultimately be the saints that they were called to be through the various virtues that they would learn. And even though I had since been moved from that parish to another to work on yet another project, I was kind of shocked in this last year when one of my former students showed up at the new parish I'm at, which is about 35 minutes away. And after Mass, she was with her mother, and they came up to me in the driveway of the church after Mass, and she asked me to sponsor her for her confirmation. And she was just impressed by the fact that I was willing to take time out of what she knew was a busy schedule of my own to actually take interest and concern in where the 8th grade students were in their knowledge and love of God and of their growth in the faith. And, I kind of took that as just a sign that those Wednesday mornings, which, I had 10 million other things I could do. I deferred every funeral that came in on Wednesday so that I could be with the students in my school. I mean, it was worth it. Even if it was just for this one student, it was worth it because they recognized that someone took an interest in them and someone, a priest, a visible connection to the universal church in that way, was concerned about their growth in the spiritual life. One of the other things that I came to know, especially through my work in the school board, which I've been on now for 4 years, has been the needs of the faculty in our schools. And I think Msgr. Batule spoke to the faculty is kind of needing a special presence to them as well. One of the things that I was privileged to work on in this last year is establishing a relationship with Providence College through their PACT program, which is a program by which current Catholic school teachers kind of live and work in community while achieving their master's degrees in education. And the PACT program was able to establish kind of a summer seminar, which, like many things, has to be done virtually this year, for the teachers of our diocese to help them in their own growth and knowledge of faith in general. We came to recognize that for many of the grammar school level students, or teachers rather, they may have had some kind of specialized training either in literacy, math, something along those lines, but they had not had any kind of formal training in religion and may not have even been products of Catholic school themselves. And we're very often giving them a religion textbook and telling them this is the curricula that we want you to teach these students, and they had no knowledge of the books that they were being asked to teach. I mean, they may have had kind of cursory teachings of it in one way or another. And, I, at least in the schools that I was responsible for, was making sure that my teachers were active practitioners of the faith, but it didn't mean that they necessarily knew the substance of the faith. And several of the teachers have taken advantage of the fact that this is now open to them as a means of continuing education and formation. I decided very early on that the continuing formation days being offered by my diocesan office of education were of no benefit to my faculty whatsoever, and ended up being an enormous waste of time. So I would do the spiritual formation days myself and offer something of substance that I think would be not only enriching to the teachers, but would help them to recognize that the faith is at the very core and heart of what we were as a Catholic school. The principal who had been at the school was there for 14 years. She was the last religious sister principal in the whole diocese. And she had good instincts, but they were kind of tired instincts in many ways. She did go out of her way to make a chapel in the school and to make sure that the Blessed Sacrament was there, which I was very happy about. However, not many of the students knew about it or frequented it. So exposing the students to the devotions of the church, especially adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, making that available from time to time, letting them know that the Sacrament of Reconciliation would be available, especially in Advent and Lent, during the school day, to offer them those opportunities to receive those sacraments. It became an opportunity, I think, for the priestly presence in the school to help witness a little stronger to the faith in a school that wasn't necessarily on the rocks, but that just could have used some direction in where faith necessarily was going. That principal, she was in her late 70s when I was there, and she ended up retiring my final year in that assignment. So we led a search and hired a new principal, and one of the things that I was absolutely adamant about was the active practice of the faith, and that, you know, amidst any other qualifications or degrees, that the person who was going to be the head of that school, at least in the academic sense, was going to be also a witness to the faith that we professed and that we held. And thankfully, we were able to find a candidate who was a good example of that, and she's doing quite well at that school in that position now. Also, my final year in the that particular assignment, I helped open an early learning center, which was a new endeavor for our diocesan office of education. I was sitting in one of the school board meetings, and they had talked about wanting to venture into the age of age group of early education, and to get kind of a feeder system going, based a little bit off of Maria Montessori's style, but we were going to be taking newborns through 3 years old and have it as a feeder system into the preschool at the grammar school. And it has worked out. It opened this past year, and I know this past year in many educational circles was kind of threatened and had to change a little bit, but it became an opportunity to venture into a new kind of chapter of Catholic education. I had a facility at one of the parishes I was responsible for that had been built as a parish school. It had never opened as a parish school, but it had plenty of classrooms. An investment was made to renovate the building, and now that is an operational learning center. I'm always trying to stay attuned to what the needs for Catholic education are in the local scene of the diocese in which I work, Fall River. I'm assigned now in a town called Westport, which is a really lovely kind of bucolic town along the coast of Buzzards Bay, looking out towards Cape Cod. And I'm bordered by towns in Rhode Island, heading towards Newport, and that's over on a separate island and all. But it's a rather affluent part of the world where I'm at right now. And I've noticed that just in my immediate area, the parish I'm responsible for now, the parish I'll be taking on in addition to this one, beginning September 1st, as well as the 8 parishes that surround us, both in this Diocese of Fall River and the neighboring town of Tiverton, Rhode Island, in the Diocese of Providence. There are 10 parishes without a single school. 10 parishes, and it's really something when you look at what we're trying to figure out for the future of our faith, the future of our parishes. I probably come from the last vestige of someone whose life basically revolved around their parish and their parish school in my earliest years. I can't fathom how a parish without an active school envisions its own success well into the future. So even as my current project right now is to bring together 3 small parishes in the town where I'm at, one of the things I've been charged with is finding a location where that could happen. And the town that I'm in is offloading one of their public schools a year from now. And the move is actually going to be to acquire that building as the site not only for the new parish, but also, and this is my vision, to use the existing school building to open a classical academy, which does not currently exist anywhere in this diocese, nor does it exist anywhere within an hour-and-a-half radius of where I currently am. The model would be kind of based off of something that had evolved from the older days in Philadelphia, of basically the parish itself is built up around the school. The school would be the first building to be constructed. And if this works out, it's going to be the case that the school building is already there and already constructed, and allow the parish to be built up around it. There's enough of a gauged interest in wanting to do something like this that I think it could be an incredible success. And like I said, the classical education market is not currently in this area. And it's a niche market that provides, I think, an opportunity for a diversified education that is extremely rooted in the Catholic faith that we're professing. And I know that there'll be other presenters on taking the classical model going forward. You know, as a diocesan priest, a parish priest, I just in the local diocesan scene, which is very sad on the education front, I've just tried to be a positive influence to the extent that I can for some of the things learned in this seminar, to be able to bring them to the diocesan level, even though they're often met with resistance and sometimes met with differing opinions that are undermining by superintendent's offices or even the bishop's office itself. To the point where the local Catholic high school, which is only 10 minutes away from me here, where I'm sending students from my own parish and where I'm providing subsidies for tuition, did not have a chaplain, did not have a priest presence, did not have any kind of influence from the institutional church at all. And, you know, it bugged me, not just from an administrative standpoint, that I'm cutting a check for thousands of dollars for my parishioners to go to Bishop Conley High School, but that the schools themselves were seen as so secondary or backseat that there wouldn't be anyone responsible for the spiritual health or well-being of those students or faculty. So I've kind of took on that role in kind of an ad hoc capacity as needed. But I think that, you know, the lessons learned from this seminar, I think annual coming back to it and being refreshed by it, are in one way or another undergirding my own love of school, my own desire to be involved, and to be that presence and that witness both to the students and the faculty, the parents, as Msgr Batule said. And I would also say, add another group to that, the alumni of the graduates of the school, especially the grammar schools and high schools who may have a vested interest in seeing the place stay around for their own parents, or for their own children rather, when they become parents, and who have that sense of healthy Catholic pride for what it is that they've received. I know that my own experience is not extraordinary in any way in what's been done, but it's just trying to do what can be done with the resources that are available, and recognizing, though the presence of the priest in general in the Northeast is kind of diminishing in its role, that priests can still be as active as they want or desire in the education apostolate while the church is at it.
Thank you, Father Chris. A couple of points. Leave it to Father Chris to talk about food with kids. But it did remind me of a wonderful recollection I have. Some of you were talking about having daily mass for kids, weekly mass, and so forth. I've got to tell you that for the most part in the Northeast, that was not a practice. We generally had mass only on first Friday of the month. And, but we was still, when I was in junior high, we would have that mass at 8:30 on first Friday morning. And of course, it was still the 3-hour communion fast, which logically meant that most of us were going to school not having had breakfast. And the pastor almost universally took that mass, and then he would come over to the school cafeteria and personally serve us donuts and hot chocolate. And so our association with devotion to the Sacred Heart had a couple of connections. So yes, obviously it was the religious, but also the familiarity of being pastor, who was a very old man. The parish at the time, will tell you an interesting story, is when I was in 7th grade, the parish had its 110th anniversary and was only on its second pastor. The founding pastor had been there 60 years, and the incumbent was 50. And if you want to talk about longevity, and of course, all the studies now show, by the way, the longer a priest is in a parish, the greater effect he has, and even especially on the issue of priestly vocations. The second point that Father Chris made that I'd like to highlight is the importance of an alumni association for grammar schools. We didn't think of that in the 50s and 60s and even in the 70s. Why? Because it was a self-perpetuating institution, and people didn't move the way they do today. And so you had second and third and fourth generation families in a school. I gave a workshop to a parish in the Bronx, school faculty, where 2 of the teachers had been on the faculty for 41 years, and they had gone to the school, and their parents had gone to the school. So that kind of a process doesn't exist with the mobility of people today. So it's really, really important to establish a viable alumni association. And as grammar schools have tried to get into that, they've discovered how difficult it is to do that ex post facto. How do you dig up who's gone where when some people are on, opposite coasts and opposite poles and so forth? So to do that right now, make sure you're doing it, and then also to play catch-up ball if you need to. But those are people who, for the most part, will tell you that they are who they are today because of what that school did for them. And in general, they're rather grateful for it, and they should be given the opportunity to show that gratitude. Monsignor Sal, you came in for Mass now, so you're glowing with sanctity. Monsignor Sal was a public school teacher for a little bit, and then he went into the seminary, and he was a very successful high school principal as a priest, turned the place around completely, and then for, was it 11 years, the superintendent for high schools for the Archdiocese, and it was in that connection that our Catholic Education Foundation did the Catholic identity assessments for their high schools, which, by the way, thanks to him and his great intentionality of faculty and administration, those schools came out with glowing marks. So give us your words of wisdom.
Thank you for the intro, Padre. Before that little bio, one of the priests had mentioned Father Chris had mentioned being in a product of Catholic school. I graduated from 12 years of public school. I was in a Catholic elementary school for 1 week in the 4th grade and missed all my buddies and went back across the street to the public school. But when I was in the seminary college, our public high school had, I think, 6 graduates at the seminary college. And it was the highest contingent from any high school in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles at that time. And we attributed to the fact that we had sisters in the religious ed program who taught us public school kids. And they would come to games at the school. They'd be at assemblies and things. They were very present to the public school kids. And I think it was the presence of religious that we all know has an effect that caused so many of us, or it helped so many of us to go into the seminary at that time. Before I get into some points with regard to the pastor and the priest presence, I want to point out yesterday I spent a couple hours going through about 20 years of electronic files, and I picked out what I thought in that time period might be helpful, and I sent them over to Kevin. Kevin, I guess, has downloaded them onto the link, and I'd just like to go through a few of them very briefly. I put them all in this conference's session rather than the other 2 that I'm on, because these topics are all over the place, but a lot of them have to do with Catholic identity, which is connected to the priest's presence. And even if they're not specifically about priest presence, they become a resource, I think, for the priest who especially might be new to priesthood or new to being in a parish with a school, or maybe being new as a chaplain to a local diocesan or parish high school. So I'm not sure if you all have your desktops nearby, but if you were just to look at the list, we don't have to open any of them now, but if you were to look at the list, there are 27 that I sent your way that Kevin downloaded. And the first couple of them say ADLA. Those are documents from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. That's the ADLA. And then there's a few that say SP, and those are my initials. So the ones that say SP I put together, and the ones that say ADLA are from things, a lot of them I put together as well, but some were a group effort. But when you look at the ADLA things, I'll just read some of them. Active consecration for all high schools, revised with creed. We would, at the annual principals retreat, overnight retreat, consecrate all the high schools to the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart, and then the principals would recite the profession of faith that the deacons and priests recite before ordination. So they had the little the extra paragraph about the magisterium. In that list that you have, there's you'll see something that says ADLA Admin Handbook Chapter 4 on Catholic Identity, 2016, and another one from 2010. The administrative handbook for the Archdiocese, I think, is really a tremendous document, and it can be a resource for any diocese in the United States. It's very extensive. Every chapter is loaded with appendices, with documents that or activities or types of things that you could use. There are chapters on personnel. There's chapters on safeguard the children, but the chapter 4 is the Catholic Identity chapter. The 2010 edition is something that I wrote and had to have reviewed by our theological commission, and then sat down with one of the auxiliary bishops and worked it out. It's, I think it's pretty good in the sense of how it covers the issues. 2016 edition is much broader because the lawyers got involved. And they also wanted a document that would also cover our religious ed office. And if you know anything about our religious ed office, you know that would have been a big challenge. They're the ones that put on our annual religious ed Congress. One of the best things of all those 27 items is called ADLA Catholic ID interview questions for teacher or staff applicants. This, I think, is the most valuable thing for a pastor or for a principal, because if you have a good process for interviewing your future teachers, and you can deal with the Catholic identity issue in a very good way, you might root out future problems. If you're not part of the interview, if you're not bringing up the Catholic identity issue, and if your principal doesn't feel confident enough to know how to do that in a legal way, then you might end up with somebody that you're going to have a big problem with for quite a while till you can legally get the person out of there. But these questions on Catholic identity for staff or teacher applicants, they were written and put together by one of the Norbertine priests from Orange County, who is rector of one of our parish high schools in the Archdiocese. And he did a great job with it. They use it all the time for everybody that they interview. And he, at some point, a number of years ago, he sent them my way. And I ran them by our lawyers, and the lawyer said, these are perfect. She had one grammatical change, and that was it. And we're dealing with California law, which is pretty liberal. So if they could pass muster with the California law, they can pass muster across the country. But they're very good questions. You probably couldn't use all of them because there are a lot there, but it would really help to get the discussion going in the interview process for a teacher or even staff. We also were pretty collaborative. We ran them through the Principals Advisory Council and then a general principals meeting. So they all had buy-in on it. And I believe many of the schools are using those questions. It's in the online handbook. You can download it as a document, but you also have it here now. There's a ceremony here for installation of a new principal. If you're a pastor, you're going to have a new principal eventually. You might have it more than once. And having a special type of ceremony can, I think, enhance the purpose of a principal and the purpose of the Catholic school. It's basically taking the installation of a pastor and adapting it to a principal. But it can be done up with a celebration. And it's been appreciated by the principals that have used it. Catholic ID and Faculty Faith Formation Report Form is aligned with all the criteria with regard to what we're looking for in Catholic high schools, but it can be adapted very easily to Catholic elementary schools. School mass guidelines, especially if you have a high school, or if you have an elementary school that isn't close to the church where you have to have the mass in a gym, it's a pretty handy list, but especially if you're dealing with the high school. There's a teacher consecration and commissioning ceremony. Carmelite Sisters in Alhambra put this together. They have the custom of having their opening faculty retreat with all of their schools at their retreat house. And then at the end of the day, they have a teacher consecration and commissioning ceremony that can be easily used with any parish faculty at the end of a faculty meeting. And again, I know the title is priestly presence. All these things really require the priest pushing them, because the average lay principal might be all new to them. And so having the priest pushing these type of things is very helpful. And there's a couple of articles I threw in there, one with Cardinal Burke, one with Bishop Barron, one with Father Rutler, even Andrew Greeley. And Father McBrien, Richard McBrien, did a two-part series on lay leadership in Catholic education that it's hard to believe he actually wrote it, but it's a very interesting that how he even foresaw the issues with regard to lay leadership and Catholic identity. Something I wrote about another look at Catholic education as an advantage for life, short thing. There's a May crowning ceremony. Now, next one, parent-student pledge. I would encourage you to look at that one along with the interview questions. The parent-student pledge is something I got the original idea, I think, from an article I read in the NCA magazine. I think it was Mobile Diocese or Memphis. They came up with some type of parent pledge back in the 90s or maybe early 2000s. And I liked what I saw, and I put it together, and we added a lot to it, worked it out with our faculty. We brainstormed and refined it, and eventually it became the parent-student pledge for our high school when I was a principal. And then I gave it to all of the high schools when I was superintendent, and we use it here in this parish where I'm pastor now. It covers, one of the goals was to keep it to one page. So the print is pretty small, but it covers a lot of things. And, you know, there's always some of the regular issues with parents, you know, not going to Mass on Sunday, the kids not being in the confirmation program if it's a high school program. It covers amazingly a lot of things that might be big issues or priorities for a pastor with regard to Catholic identity for our parish school. So I'd encourage you to look at it and to see if maybe it's something you might be able to adapt to your own parish. It's a Word document, so you can edit it, manipulate it, expand it, or shrink it, whatever you like. There's a sample of a parish vision, mission, and philosophy statement. It was the last one I did as I was ending my time as a principal and moving into the superintendent's job. You know, every school has to have one of these, and there's so many to choose from, and sometimes they sound very corporate. But this particular one I was very happy with because of the focus it places on the Catholic aspect or the Catholic mission of the school. So there's a sample of that. Because St. Junipero Serra has been in the news lately, I threw in a homily I did at all of our masses a few weeks ago. And again, a few more articles. So I think that covers all of those 27. There's a number of articles in there just for your reading pleasure there. Before I move on, any questions on any of those things that it spur any questions, or I can continue?
This is a very placid crowd, Monsignor.
I don't blame them. Zoom meetings are very different. My secretary says, well, isn't it easier to fall asleep? I said, no, because they can all see you. Anyway, so.
Some of them are kicked off, though, so we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, because I always like to see the Vatican background. That's some of the priests have. Anyway, so that's it with regard to the documents. Now, some random items with regard to, I've only been a pastor 2 years now, this last July 1st. It was 21 years in high school work, 12 as a principal and 9 as a superintendent. So these last 2 years have been a lot of fun. Some of my former colleagues say I look much younger now that I'm in parish work again. So I don't know if that's true, but here's my random list. Here we were having 3 masses a week. It was interesting, Father Peter mentioned at one time it was just First Friday, and I think that was the case here with a lot of elementary schools too. For the parish high school, one of the big deals that was an accomplishment for that all of the high schools was at least having a minimum of 1 mass a month. That wasn't even happening when I became superintendent. But here we were doing 3. Friday was the whole school. Tuesday were the lower grades, Thursday were the upper grades. Now with all the latest rules about reopening, we're not sure how it's going to work yet, but it might be 4 days a week, but just 1 class at a time or 2 classes at a time. it sounds like with the California rules that we're not going to be able to have the whole school in session at one time. And these rules discourage any type of group assemblies. So, and it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight to this, at least in a blue state like California.
Yes.
So we'll see. But as of this last year, it was 3 masses a week. But it may turn into a class mass or 2 classes at a time. Principal asked about doing a school mass virtually, and we did it. We were doing this for 2-3 months, and I'm not sure I want to continue that because they're not really attending mass. They're not receiving communion. It's very artificial. We have people that haven't come back to Sunday mass because they like watching it on TV. And so it's even though it provided a good service, it's created some bad habits on the part of people. So we'll see where that goes. I meet weekly with the principal. We have it usually Monday mornings, mid-morning. If the parish staff, the monthly parish staff meeting happens on that morning, then she and I meet right after the meeting. And that's very helpful. We can stay on top of a lot of business that needs to be dealt with in the school. Parent meetings, she only had scheduled, I think, 2, now we're up to 4. And I make sure that it's on my calendar, and that if I can be there, that she changes the date so that I can be there. And she likes a lot of notice, so we work out the calendar way in advance. But my predecessor would go to these meetings, say an opening prayer, and then leave. And when I went to the first parent meeting, I didn't know that. And when I went to the first parent meeting, I led the prayer, and then I sat down and stayed for the rest of the meeting, and the parents were in shock. It was like, some of them came up to me and thanked me for staying for the meeting, and I thought, well, why wouldn't I stay for the meeting? And then I found out that he never did, which it was his approach, I guess. One thing that we've done is, rather than have the short opening prayer, to have something more substantive. At one meeting, I gave a little short talk on the 4 steps to meditation or prayer, and then I led them through it with a little scripture passage along with it, and it took maybe 15 minutes, but I got them all settled down, and they actually were meditating, and it made an impression on some of them. And I said, you can do that in 2 minutes, you can do it in 3 minutes, and you can do that every day. And you can see the light bulbs going on the parents' heads. Oh, that wasn't that hard. I could pray, I could meditate. But taking advantage of that prayer, which you're going to be giving anyway, and getting a little more time on the agenda so you can do something with it is pretty helpful. One thing we did this last year was convert one of those meetings into a full parent evening of recollection, or a parent retreat. I think it was the November meeting, and it was only an hour and a half, I think. But these parents, some of them were my students when I was a principal, and so their attention span is shorter than maybe an older generation like mine or some of the fathers. But having media interspersed in the retreat was very helpful, letting them reflect on the appropriate media in a small group for like 3 minutes so they can have some interchange, and then getting their responses help them to integrate. And one thing that I found to be very helpful, I don't know if any of the fathers have seen this or brother has seen this, there's something on YouTube, a channel called Keane Wine, Canaan Wine. And I'm not sure if it comes out of Mundelein or where it comes from. There's some reference to it at some point. But there are these 10-minute clips that are very well done. They usually incorporate a movie or a film into the theme. And I've used them with kids, high school kids, and I've used them with parents, and they always get a good response. They're very thought-provoking and good spiritual themes. If you look it up on YouTube, Keane Wine, there's a whole channel. There might be about 20 25 clips, all different themes, and many contemporary themes as well. It's very helpful for a retreat. If you take the whole hour and a half to talk without any type of audio visual, it can be harder unless you're just a super charismatic speaker, and whatever works, right? Next on my random list is the altar server program. Developing a program in your parish that really incorporates the students in the school, recruiting in the school, you doing it yourself rather than letting an altar server coordinator do it, and trying to at least be at some of the practices or rehearsals where they're learning, at least doing a little prayer and a little pep talk at that. Those servers are kind of your front line of your students in your parish school. And I know in our particular case, a few vocations are being thought about because of that contact with the priest and the connection to serving not just the Sunday Mass or the weekday Mass, but also all the funerals, getting out of class to serve the funerals. Handbooks. Every school has or should have a parent handbook as well as a student handbook. Or a parent-student handbook and then a faculty handbook. If you're not aware of it or if you never reviewed it, summertime is a great time to get a hard copy of both and get your red pen or a pencil and just go through it and see what's there, becoming very familiar with it, but also making sure that Catholic identity, number one, is covered appropriately, but also that it's covered and that it's covered in a substantive way. There are probably hundreds of samples of this online now because of the internet, and you might get some great ideas. And maybe Father Peter has an idea with regard to some of the ones that he's seen over the years visiting so many different schools. But you can cut and paste. Most of them aren't copyrighted. You might get a great intro on Catholic identity from a particular school that you can just use at your school. Or you might want to write something yourself that will meet where you want your school to go. Faculty meetings. They meet very often. I think it would be difficult to go to all their meetings, but at least know when they meet and trying to pop in or at least joining them for lunch if they're having a lunch. I mean, we all have to eat lunch most of the time. Get a free lunch and you get to be with the faculty. Many faculties have some young people on them that might be vocation possibilities as well, or at least are vocation possibilities with regard to the sacrament of marriage, which is something we need to be working on too. So joining them for a meeting or at least the opening prayer, joining them for lunch, going to their faculty, having a Christmas party for them, having an end of the year party. Usually the schools do that anyway, but maybe you hosting it. If you have a nice space in the rectory or in the rectory yard or hosting it at the restaurant. And one last little note I jotted down at the end. Students eating lunch. At our place, they've kind of taken over the parish hall for lunch. It's happened a couple of years before I arrived. So they're in there every day. And again, it's a free lunch for you. It's a free lunch for me. I go over, get my lunch, and I just sit down at a random table. And the kids love it. And it doesn't matter the age, whether they're 8th graders or they're 3rd graders, they love it. And their whole conversation is they want to ask you a million questions. One time we had enough time before their lunch ended, and one of the girls said, "Well, what's that? What's behind the altar?" I didn't know what they're talking about. There's doors by the altar. What's behind it? Oh, that's called the sacristy. And I looked at the clocks. Oh, we have 15 minutes. Let's go over. We took the whole table over. We walked through the whole sacristy. I even took them over to the choir loft to saw the view from the choir loft. They got so excited, they still talk about it. And it's something so simple, easy to do, gives us a little exercise. And it's a definite presence with the kids, something very simple. So that's my random list. Hope it was helpful, but I really encourage you to look at some of those docs that are on the doc section of this conference.
Thank you.
Very much.
You can tell the the experience and the conviction that's there. In regard to the teacher and principal installation ceremonies, I know a lot of schools do that kind of thing, but they do it during the as part of a faculty meeting or something. My preference would be, particularly if it's a parish school, that it be done at a parish mass on a Sunday morning, emphasizing once again, here is the faith leadership of this parish and how this school is intimately connected to the parish community. Monsignor mentioned the pledge. Some dioceses refer to it as a covenant, but it's saying that this is what we pledge to do. This is the covenant that we're entering into with this parish community and this school and so forth. I should mention, he mentioned the Sunday Mass attendance. I've got to say, to me, it's absolutely inconceivable that a kid could go to Catholic school and not go to Mass on Sunday. And I think that has to be part of the entire identity issue. And how is that? When I was a high school principal, the kids were told that if they missed 3 Sunday Masses in a semester, they were expelled. No discussion whatsoever. With grammar school, with little kids, you can't blame them. Most priests will tell you that one of the most heartbreaking confessions to hear is a little kid that says, I don't go to Mass because my mommy won't take me. Of course, I have a penance for those kids. I tell them, I ask them, if you wanted to go to the mall or to the movie and your mother said no, what would you do? I'd ask her again. And if she still said no, I'd ask her again. And I said, and if you kept asking, eventually, perhaps you might start stomping your feet until she finally said, get in the car, let's go. Yep. I said, okay, well, here's your penance. Starting next Saturday, starting at 4 o'clock until 7 or 8 on Sunday night, you keep stomping your feet until your mother says, get in the car, we're going to church. And if she asks you why you behave that way, you tell her, the priest said that it's not my sin, it's your sin, and this is my penance for you. And it's amazing, even at the high school level, I had pushback for that rule. It did not come from the kids or the parents. It came from the 2 other priests on the faculty, and it came from the pastors. Every pastor admitted that his Sunday teen Mass attendance was exponentially improved. In any other organization, I'd get at least a gold watch for it, and not in the church. And they had the most ridiculous angles about why this shouldn't be done. One was, do you know how, because, well, you're going to ask, what was the enforcement mechanism? Number one, kid had to get a bulletin signed by the celebrant of the Mass. Well, I'm not stupid. I know I can have anybody get a bulletin signed by anybody. That didn't prove anything. But in first period on Monday morning, they had to write a 2-paragraph essay on the homily. What did Father say? Paragraph 1, paragraph 2. What did you think of it? At any rate, one priest said to me, he said, this is just on a Sunday morning. I have to stand there and sign bulletins. This whole thing is just exhausting. And I said, Father, I know. I celebrate Mass, and I know it's like being on Calvary myself. It's at the end of it, I'm wiped out completely. He said, well, you're being sarcastic. I said, no, I'm trying to point out the ridiculous nature of what you're saying, all right? Another priest told me that it gives kids a bad taste for religion when you force them to do something. I said, this was a high school on Staten Island, and I said, the head of our English department requires every student to go once a year into Manhattan to a live Shakespeare play. Now, in New York, kids don't get their licenses until they're 18. So, number one, this would mean something of a car service. The ticket at the time, that's 20 plus years ago, for the Shakespeare play was $75. And although the Nedick's hot dogs on the street are very good, those kids were not going to go have a hot dog. So we're probably talking about an investment of $150 to $200 for a kid to go to a live Shakespeare play. I said, and not a single parent ever complains about that. They say, no, thank God she's doing that with them, because she's giving them an experience of culture that we hope they're going to keep with them for the rest of their lives. I said, that's what we're trying to do with the Sunday Mass. And I said, and more to the point, that we're also trying to save their souls, that we don't want them to go to hell because they're missing Sunday Mass. And he said to me, you believe that garbage? He didn't use the word garbage. Well, of course, once again, we've met the enemy and it's us. But certainly the whole issue of Sunday Mass attendance is critical. With grammar school kids, I think it's important and an easy thing to do. And this may be something that the priest himself wants to do, or certainly to ensure that the teachers are doing. On Friday afternoon, perhaps the last exercise of Friday school, is to go over the Sunday readings, point out big words that are in the readings that the kids may not know, perhaps give some background to it. But what are you doing? You're setting an expectation that they're going to do that on Sunday. And then the first thing on Monday morning is to ask kids to talk about the homilies that they heard. And again, that's a way of cementing the expectation. When Msgr talks about the TV Mass, I was told by some Polish friends from Poland that the Polish bishops told the people that these TV Masses, the bishops had certain expectations. Number one, the people were to dress up as they would for Sunday Mass, so not Mass in your pajamas. Number two, you're to stand, sit, kneel, and everything as you normally would in church. And really pastors that someone from the community, from that family or whatever, was then to take the money for that destined for the collection and bring it to the rectory at the end of the audio visual Mass. And so I think he's right. I've heard people say, yeah, gee, this was really nice, and who wants to go back? Although I think most people that were serious about Sunday Mass are serious about going back. But you don't want to give people additional excuses. And then finally, when Father Sal talks about what we used to call show and tell, this is a wonderful thing for a priest to do, is bring first and second graders in to the church, give them a tour of the church. The baptismal font, this is where you were baptized, this is this. Take them into the sacristy, show them the vestments, the names of the vestments, the vessels, and so forth. Kids love that stuff, and it's stuff that they do remember. And it's something that a priest is uniquely situated to do. These are the tools of our trade, huh? And we're sharing them with the kids. So those would be my comments at the moment. Anybody? Did Bishop Kennedy ever? He came on and then he disappeared again. Bishop, are you around? He must be having an apparition or something. So, all right. Well, let's take a 10-minute break, and then most of these same clerical gentlemen are going to be involved in the next round as well. So at 4 o'clock.